Hello everybody, this is Lucas. The goal of this video is to educate new players about basic mechanics of Team Fortress 2. If you look at the main menu, you see there's lots of buttons that do various things. This video is going to be focusing mainly on the options that you can tweak. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now you can see there's an options tab here as we open it up. The first thing you're going to see is your keyboard tab. What this is going to let you change is your keybinds, like what button you hit to jump, and you can look through all this and mess with it as you like. You can scroll down, there's lots of commands, like the one for ducking, voice chat, calling for the medic, change class, change your loadout. But let's go ahead and there's also this advanced tab. What the advanced tab does is there's two options in here. Fast weapon switch is an option by default when you hit either one of the number keys for that slot, or when you scroll up or down. It has this little menu on the right hand side of your screen, and then when you click it selects that weapon. Fast weapon switch allows you to go directly to that weapon when you press or scroll. There's also another option called Enable Developer Console. You may not use it on a day-to-day basis, however there's lots of options you can do. You can check your frame rate in-game without using Fraps or any other benchmarking program. You can mess with settings. There's just a lot of stuff you can do, but we're not going to go into that right now. There's also the mouse tab. The mouse tab has lots of options. Right off the bat, you'll see the mouse sensitivity selector, and you can mess with that as you see fit. There's also a box that I have checked called raw mouse input, and basically what that does is, by default, Windows has something called mouse acceleration, which means the faster you move the mouse, the farther it moves, which is handy if you're like in an office computer that don't have a lot of space, but for precision it's best to turn it off. You can also, if you happen to want mouse acceleration on, you can tell it how much you actually want. There's also options for reversing the mouse, and if you want to play with a controller. Alrighty, this is the audio tab. What the audio tab does, as the name implies, it allows you to mess with your audio settings. For instance, your general game volume, if you want to use a speaker setup or a headphone setup, what language you're playing in, probably English if you're watching this video, how loud the music you want it to be, your sound quality, and closed captioning. Quick note that closed captioning does not work in TF2 as of the publication of this video. Let's go ahead and go over to our video settings tab, and in this tab you can mess with your basic stuff. If you want to play the game in a window or full screen, what resolution you want to be playing in, what aspect ratio. There's also a tab for advanced options, which I won't be getting into, but you can take a look at that. Also, there is a voice chat tab. The voice chat tab allows you to mess with, first of all, enabling voice chat, as well as how loud you want it to be, how loud you want to send it. You can also test to see what yours will sound like. And then there's the multiplayer tab. The basic multiplayer tab has options like selecting what custom crosshair you want to use, if you want to use one, how big you want your crosshair to be, color your crosshair you want to be, and you can leave these at the default if you want. You can mess around with it later. Also, there's options for sprays. If you don't know, a spray is an image that you import into the game to be sprayed on a wall or on a floor, and you can mess with this again all you want. We're going to go ahead and go to the Advanced tab, though. The Advanced tab has lots of options. You can also access the Advanced tab from the little cog or gear next to the Options tab, which is what we're going to do for the sake of this video. So right now you can see there's lots of options to mess with in here. The first one is automatically reload weapons when you're not firing. It's pretty self-explanatory. Underneath that, play a sound every time you injure an enemy. If you're familiar with like Quake, with the hit sounds, and it's similar to that. It's not the exact same sound effect, but you can have that on if you want. Underneath that, display damage done as text over your target. What it will do is it'll show you how much damage you're doing to your enemies, which is pretty nifty. The next two, remember the active weapon between lives, and remember the previous weapon between lives. Active weapon, it'll remember what weapon you were using last. Previous weapon will remember, basically, by default, if you hit Q, it'll go back to your last weapon. and it'll remember that last weapon. Underneath that, we get into class-specific options. It starts off with the Spy, Enable Concise Disguise menu. What that does is, rather than hitting numbers 1 through 9 for your disguises, you only have to use 1 through 4, which is useful if you don't have to move your hand. You do have to press an extra button, though. Underneath that, the Sniper. The sniper rifle will resume after firing a zoomed shot. Some people may not wish to have that on for the sake of accuracy. I have it off. Some people wish to have it on because they want to resume in and take another shot. Underneath that, there is an option for the Medigun, or for the Medic. The Medigun continues healing without holding down the fire button. This is useful for the beginning of a round if you want to send a Steam message or whatever. Underneath that, Medic. Display a marker over the player you're healing. Basically, this is useful because if you're healing a bunch of people and you want to know exactly who you're healing, or you want to Uber, it'll show a little arrow above their head. So that's very useful. Underneath that, there's an option for the Medic again. Injured teammates automatically call out, which basically means that you'll hear a little ding, ding type sound, and a little HUD element will pop up telling you where your teammates are if they're damaged. There's also an indicator below it telling you how much percentage of their health they'll have when they call. The next option is Enable Minimal HUD. By default, the HUD for some people can be rather bulky and maybe in your way, and so there's a minimal HUD built into TF2 that you can mess around with and see if you like. It does remove a few things though, so you may want to be used to the game before trying it, but you're welcome to mess around with it. The next two options, turn on colorblind mode. Basically, some of the effects in TF2 may be hard to see if you can't see colors very good, and so there's options for that. I have it on because it shows players who are Girardi'd with a little icon above their head, which is useful. Underneath that is, which most people may not use, is an option that says use advanced spectator HUD in tournament mode. If you're playing in a competitive game, it'll show your teammates' health and the medic's Uber charge. If you're watching it, it will show both teams. There's no real downside to not have it on. Show non-standard items on spectator player. What you can do with this is, like if somebody has a unlockable weapon, it'll show the name of it, the attributes, and the description. However, it does this during the spectator, when you're spectating somebody, so you may wish to have that disabled to have more screen space. Following that, there's an option that says use glow effect for payload objectives. This actually applies to more than payload objectives. Basically, if there's a CTF flag or a payload or payload race cart, it'll have a little bit of a glow. If you're familiar with Left 4 Dead 2, it would be like the survivor glow, and it'll show you where the objective is, and you'll be able to see through walls, see through the wall with a little glow outline, which is useful. The next option is View Model Field of View, and that controls what your view models look like. You can mess around with it. Larger values will make the weapon smaller on screen, so you can mess around with that. If you don't like it, then again, it's your config, you're the one messing with it. The next set of options really only apply if you're using a proxy, and you can set those options for if you're going to be uploading videos to YouTube through TF2, like replays, and there's options for that. I'm not going to go into that right now. Underneath that, there is performance options. The first one is disable weather effects. There are several maps that have weather effects ranging from rain to snow, so you may wish to disable those for a higher frame rate or if they're distracting to you. Underneath that, there is a option marked disable HTML message of the days. Some servers have like a custom graphic for their greeting message, and you may just want to see a text message rather than a big graphic you're going to have to load, so you can disable it that way. Underneath that, there's a box marked multiplayer decal limit. Multiplayer decal limit is anytime a bullet hits the wall or an explosion happens or somebody puts down a spray, that is a decal. And you can, for performance sake, you can limit that. If you think your computer's able to handle more decals, you can raise or lower that to your liking. And now we get to miscellaneous options. The first one is autosave a scoreboard screenshot at the end of the map. It's pretty self-explanatory. Underneath that, suicide after choosing a player class. If you're outside of a respawn zone and you decide you want to switch to heavy, if you're playing pyro or whatever, then it will kill you and then send you through respawn and then back. Otherwise, you have to run all the way back to respawn, and it might be quicker. Underneath that, there's a box marked automatically respawn after loadout changes in respawn zones. This is a relatively new feature. I have it disabled because when you change your weapons and then respawn, it removes like any kind of kill streaks or like records you may have going. It ends it right there and starts a new life. Underneath that, there's an option called Draw View Models, and what that basically does is it means you're going to have view models on. It's pretty self-explanatory. You may wish to have that disabled if you're used to games that don't have view models on. Underneath that, there's an option called Flip View Models, which allows you to use left-handed variants if you're left-handed or if you wish to use those for whatever reason. Underneath that, there's a checkbox marked Disabled Sprays. Some people don't have very tasteful sprays, and you may wish to disable them entirely, and so here's a checkbox to do that. Next, we have Close the server browser after connecting to a server. Again, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's more or less aesthetics. The next option is Synchronize with the Steam Cloud. TF2 by default connects to Steam when you launch the game, and it can also store your settings if you wish, if you play TF2 with a similar config across several computers. I do not, so I have it unchecked. Underneath that, there is another checkbox called Show Pop-up Alerts while in-game, i.e. trade requests, and so you may wish to have that on. I do. Finally, there is a box marked Show Trade Requests From. You can set this from Nobody. Go on servers and you don't want to trade, you just want to play, you can disable it. Friends only, so if you only want to trade with friends, or with anyone, if you, for whatever reason, you may want to mess with that. That's pretty much it. So thank you for watching, and have a nice day.